is no question that the management and handling of iCare has been a disaster, exposed in day after day of hearings. At the recent Law and Justice Committee inquiry, we heard evidence of extraordinary levels of mismanagement. At the Workers' Compensation Insurer iCare inquiry, this Liberal National Government and the Treasurer in particular would like to sweep this under the rug, but we cannot allow that to happen. The iCare scandal has exposed a problem with our laws in New South Wales, a loophole that has allowed for a greedy few to game the system for their own financial benefit, a loophole that exempts iCare from the normal integrity rules that apply to public sector tenders. The consequences here have been the misuse of an immense amount of public funds and the failure to care for tens of thousands of New South Wales workers who got sick or who were injured on the job. It is crucial that we close this loophole, and this bill, the Public Works and Procurement Amendment Workers' Compensation Nominal Insurers Bill 2020, first introduced in the other place by my Greens colleague David Shoebridge and supported by the Legislative Council, now comes to our House for consideration. It is clear that there is a loophole that must be closed, and while I acknowledge that there is an inquiry still ongoing in relation to this broader scandal and these broader scandals, it is absolutely important that we act now, and this is what this bill sets out to do: close a loophole to ensure greater integrity and transparency in the ways funds are set aside to help injured workers. iCare is responsible for somewhere between $17 and $18 billion in trusts for the purpose of paying out compensation to injured workers in New South Wales. Some of this money has been supplied by employers in New South Wales who have done the right thing to ensure that if their workers are injured in the course of their jobs, they can be adequately cared for, that they can live with dignity, have their medical costs and low wages covered, and be supported to return to work wherever they can. But as the Four Corners episode reported back in July, as has been revealed during the inquiry, this is not what iCare has done. Instead, they have funneled hundreds of millions of dollars in public funding into the pockets of their mates and underpaid injured workers by upwards of $80 million. It is absolutely crucial that we act quickly to put in place the measures that are enacted by this bill to make sure that this type of scandal does not continue. To the detail of the bill, and the object of the bill is to amend the Public Works and Procurement Act 1912 and the Workers' Compensation Act 1987 to provide that the Workers' Compensation Nominal Insurer is a government agency for the purposes of Part 11 of the Public Works and Procurement Act. Part 11 puts in place clear obligations on government agencies when it comes to the procurement of goods and services, such as transparent tenders and public notifications of contracts. Now, this sounds pretty standard. Without these elements, as we have seen, and as was probably predictable, in the case of iCare, tender processes which represent huge sums of public money can easily be corrupted. It is vital that if millions of dollars of public money are to be transferred into private hands via contracts, that a process is in place to ensure this is done fairly, transparently, and most importantly, in the interests of the public. This is what the people of New South Wales expect, and rightly so. This bill amends Section 162 of the Public Works and Procurement Act 1912 to include unambiguously in the definition of government agency the Workers' Compensation Nominal Insurer established under 154A of the Workers' Compensation Act 1987. It closes a loophole. It puts in place a transitional provision, new Section 179, to avoid causing contractual uncertainty, and the provision provides that this part does not apply to an agreement for the procurement of goods and services entered into by the Workers' Compensation Nominal Insurer before the commencement of the Public Works and Procurement Amendment Workers' Compensation Nominal Insurer Act 2020. Finally, this bill amends the current provision in the Workers' Compensation Act 1987 in Section 154A that expressly states that the nominal insurer is not covered by the Public Works and Procurement Act. As we heard in the inquiry, the loophole that this bill sets out to close has allowed for $1 million to be given to the wife of the former iCare CEO under a contract that never went out to tender. And this is just one example of many. We also heard about the millions of dollars that was handed over to a corporation owned by iCare employee and his son, a corporation with no history in the field, to craft the Net Promoter Score, which was later used to give the iCare executives staggering bonuses. That contract was awarded without a tender process at all. In his first reading, in his speech in the other place, my Greens colleague David Shoebridge listed many more examples like these, all of which highlight the urgent need for this bill to put a shocking end to the misuse of public funds that has gone on within iCare under the nose of the New South Wales Treasurer for several years. It is worth noting that the New South Wales Treasurer is not present in the chamber now and is not engaging with this process and is trying to distance himself from the scandals and despicable behaviour that we have seen by the iCare in recent times. In fact, back in February, in response to immense pressure from the Greens, New South Wales Labor, and I note that the Honourable Member Daniel Mookhey is in the chamber here today, along with Unions New South Wales and the media. iCare finally published dozens of contracts worth more than $150 million on New South Wales contract database, some more than 2 years old and none disclosed within the required 45 working day period. 118 million worth of those contracts had never been put to tender. The extent of this scandal continues to unfold. Just 2 weeks ago, Sydney Morning Herald journalist Adele Ferguson, who has worked tirelessly to shed light on the issues at iCare, and I acknowledge her work in exposing these scandals and corrupt conditions, reported on another raft of contracts that were awarded on the basis of rushed or sham tenders. The tender process for a $360 million contract to build a new claims and billings platform, for example, took less than 3 weeks. A timeline so rushed that several credible vendors pulled out, leaving the Guidewire Capgemini consortium, who had close association with then iCare CEO Vivek Bhatia, the only valid candidate. Let's just go with that for a second. So we're talking about a tender process for $360 million contract to build a new claims and billings platform that took less than 3 weeks. The only valid candidate was a consortium that had close associations with former iCare CEO Vivek Bhatia. According to statements made by brave whistleblower and former iCare employee Christopher McCann, when concerns were raised by Mr Bhatia about this contract in particular, he yelled and swore at Mr McCann, banging his fists on the desk and denying that his friendship with the owner of Capgemini was a problem. Mr McCann was then forced out of iCare, the result of an ongoing campaign of bullying and intimidation, and forced to sign a confidentiality agreement, an agreement which he bravely breached in order to expose the truth. According to reports from journalist Adele Ferguson, documents show that at least one of the alternative bidders, Fineos, wrote to iCare just before the deadline to warn them that it was pulling out of the timeline because it was extremely aggressive and unrealistic for such a complex and lucrative project. It said continuing to participate and meet the deadlines proposed posed a reputational risk, and iCare proceeded regardless. Unsurprisingly, the $360 million new claims and billing platform was ultimately a disaster, leading to a huge problem for injured workers in accessing assistance, in fact denying service and payments to thousands, of leading and huge decline in return rates to work, a key indicator of how workers' compensation schemes are performing. Let's remember here that these kind of deals and these kind of arrangements that have been taking place under the nose of the New South Wales Treasurer have been happening within a body that should actually be there supporting and protecting injured workers, that should actually be there trying to provide assistance and support. But instead what we're seeing is millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars of dodgy tenders and scams being handed over to mates of former CEOs, family members of those associated with iCare. And if you want to talk about the idea of integrity, if you want to talk about the idea that people in New South Wales are struggling and need all the help they can get to make ends meet, then I would like to ask the New South Wales Treasurer, who's going to come in here next week and pretend that he's delivering gifts to the people of New South Wales because he cares about them, that he's somehow providing them with support. But at the same time, right under his nose, at this very moment, this kind of practice is going on, and millions of dollars of public money, money that should be going to injured workers in this state, is being handed over to family members and close business associates of people who are just simply in it for their own interests and for making a buck, and that is truly, truly disgraceful. Group Executive Rob Craig took home a total salary of $878,000 this year in wages and bonuses. Then Chief Executive John Nagle was paid a base salary of $700,000 in the financial year of 2018-2019, plus a $106,000 long-term performance payment. These iCare executives were likely the highest paid in the New South Wales government sector. Let's just think about that for a minute. Let's just think about the fact that one individual, Rob Craig, got a salary of $870,878. And John Nagle got a base salary of $700,000 and then another $106,000. Now that kind of money is clearly a problem. I don't care how hard you work. You don't work hard enough to earn that kind of money, and you certainly do not deserve that kind of money when you are actually scamming injured workers in this state out of their rightful supports and assistance to be able to get back to work and live with dignity and respect. It is nothing short of disgraceful. All of this money for the wasteful contracts, the huge executive bonus, the handouts to families and mates should have been going to New South Wales workers who got sick or were injured at work. And that is why this bill is so important, because greedy and immoral executives should not be given the opportunity to pocket vast sums of public money that were set aside for vulnerable people relying on that support to survive. It is why this bill needs to pass now. It is why it is urgent that we pass this bill now, because while there is an inquiry still going on, it is absolutely crucial for us to recognise that these dodgy deals, these favours for mates, these greedy actions by immoral executives can continue to occur under the nose of the Treasurer right this very instant. In fact, the Treasurer should be thanking us for this, because it actually will pull them into line and stop tainting his record for the fact that he is overseeing this outrageous and disastrous scandal as it continues to happen in New South Wales. This bill is the culmination of months of exhaustive and forensic work, and I acknowledge that my colleague, Greens MLC, David Shoebridge, and his team for the work they have done. I acknowledge New South Wales Labor MLC, Daniel Mookie, for the work that he and Unions New South Wales as well have done to push this and campaign on this publicly. I acknowledge all of them for their strong work in this area, and as I mentioned before, the forensic journalism and investigative journalism of Adele Ferguson as well in exposing these scandals. But the problem is that we shouldn't have a situation where these scandals should have to be exposed. We shouldn't require investigative journalists and members of the upper house and inquiries to have to use public money and media resources to expose this kind of scandal. It just should never happen. The Treasurer should have noticed that this was going on and said, what is happening here? Why is this happening? Someone being paid that $870,000 a year maybe should have done their job and thought, perhaps this isn't an ideal practice to just be handing out millions of dollars of contracts and tenders to mates. But instead what we have is a situation of a catcher or a gotcha approach to corruption in this state, which basically means that you can continue to do dodgy things until you get caught and then you apologise, or then you hold it and you spin it in some other way. Well, I'm sick of that, and the people of New South Wales are sick of that, because they expect more from their leaders and their government and the people that are using public money to work in the interests of the public and allegedly serve the public interest. We are sick of the idea that people take and pocket large salaries and fail to do the basics of their jobs. Their job being to support injured workers and to help them at an incredibly personally difficult time for them. This bill is something that needs to pass now. It has been informed by courageous former iCare employees, in particular, as I mentioned, Christopher McCann, who came forward to put his concerns on the public record and gave detailed statements to the regulator. I sincerely thank them on behalf of all of us in this place that want to see improved integrity and a stamping out of these problems for their bravery in coming forward. It was this Parliament just 5 years ago that placed this loophole into the public tendering controls, and it is now the responsibility of this Parliament to fix it. We find ourselves at a point where the iCare executives need to be told explicitly by this Parliament that the public money they control does not belong to them. They cannot use it however they like. They cannot give it to their wives, their brothers, or their mates. They cannot hand out public money that is meant to be going to injured workers to whoever they choose to or want without any due process. Unless urgent action is taken now, there is nothing stopping iCare continuing this way, today, tomorrow, or next week. That is why this is vital legislation and should be coming from the government, but we are here today, bringing it to this chamber. After all of the evidence, all of the revelations, the New South Wales Treasurer has done nothing when it comes to acting to stamp this out. And in the absence of any action from the Treasurer or the Premier or the New South Wales Government, then it is up to us on this side of the chamber to put a stop to these dishonest practices happening in iCare. That is why this bill must be supported, and I do not want to hear from the government on the other side to say that there is a current inquiry going, whether it be the independent inquiry or an upper house inquiry. I don't want to hear about delay to this, because at the moment, every extra bit of public money that we have available in this state should be going to vulnerable people who need it and need our support, not to well-paid executives, not to their family members, not to their business deals, because that is called corruption. And we should not stand for that kind of shit in this place.